that they're still involved with that. We're now joined by Max Olson, theathletic.com, covers college football with us today a little bit early. Max, thank you for your time. Can we all get together for champagne or whatever it is once anything actually we know what the Pac-12 can do?
I mean, I was going to bring like just a real nice batch of misinformation to today's episode, but Craig just said I can't. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, Craig banned misinformation.
Yes.
Wow. Yes, I look forward to celebrating this. Hopefully, it's like by the time I see you guys in July at Media Days, like hopefully this is done. Who knows?
God,
That'd be
I
nice.
hope so, Max.
That would be nice. We could all just focus on the season, right, and have this storyline out of the way.
Yeah, and
That'd
then
be
the Big 12 might need extra hotels if, in fact, we have it done between now and then. But bump. All right, Max, it's not a college football question, but what are your thoughts?
Wait, one thing on that though. Just want to point out, just in case anyone's like kind of confused by that stuff last night too.
Yeah,
it's one of those unique situations yesterday where Brett Yormark and George Kliavkoff are in the same place at the same time.
Yep.
And so are reporters who are covering both leagues and talking to both of those people. And so are ADs from both of those leagues. So you kind of figured, like, with all those people in Phoenix at the same time, there was going to be some update coming out. And honestly, I'm not surprised that, like, depending on who you ask, you hear differing information.
That's a great way to put it.
Good clarification, Max, to kind of set the scene there and let people know, because it is weird when you see like this is not happening, and 2 seconds later this is happening, and clearly everybody's in the same spot, so it just makes it kind of hard to unpackage, I think, for people reading it on Twitter, you know.
Max, this is not a college football question, if you don't mind, but what was your reaction when you heard about Alabama, the head baseball coach, being fired for their gambling accusations?
Yeah. I think if you've read like the ESPN story that came out, I think on May 1st, and you got to give them a lot of credit for, their gambling writer being all over this one. It's remarkable to me. I'm like, in a way, I'm not surprised, but it's kind of remarkable to me that a guy or whoever it was can go place a bet in Cincinnati, and within a couple of a bet that gets flagged because it's a big bet, I assume on Alabama baseball or whatever, and that can get flagged, and within just a couple days they can nail down what's the connection to this and fire the coach. Like, that's kind of unbelievable. And I think but also we've kind of seen this too with some of these NFL suspensions where, like, the league basically is able to kind of go through all that data and figure out who did what very quickly. I think it's an issue that we're going to just kind of continue to see happen. And, pretty shocking that it would result in an SEC baseball program firing their coach, like, right away.
Yeah, people think ChatGPT is something else. That whatever AI was running that to figure that out so fast, also very impressive.
Yeah, the oversight on that stuff is, like, technologically, I assume, like, pretty crazy at this point.
Yeah. Max, your column on Deion Sanders in Colorado and their massive roster turnover, they have plenty of people to choose from in the portal. Everybody, based on how many people are in there, really could throw 40 or 50 guys in every year and get 40 or 50 guys back out. But, it's like fishing. Like, some of them are going to be, go on the wall, and others you're going to be like, well, it's a fish. So, but they're not all winners.
That's probably a good way to put it, honestly. Yeah, I think it's so Bruce Feldman and I put up a piece today after talking with coaches and recruiting staffers from all over the country who, honestly, a lot of them are reaching out to us and just saying, like, what's going on in Colorado? Like, help me understand this, because I think you just I think it's normal. We've talked about it before. It's normal. It's maybe it shouldn't be, but it's kind of normal now for a program to lose 15, 20, 25 players in one off season. I think we're kind of seeing that, especially at the Power 5 level. We're seeing that more consistently now. But when someone goes out and runs off 50 or loses 50, everyone's just like, wait, what? Like, how does that happen? And certainly there's a lot of curiosity among experienced people in the recruiting industry about, like, how do they get back to 85? What kind of players are they going to be able to get in May when there's, like, just not that many great portal players left out there to really get the depth back to where it should be? And, like, honestly, a lot of folks just wondering, did they cut too many guys as much as they probably look at that team that they inherited that went 1-11 and got blown out a ton and think you don't have a lot of good players or alpha guys we're looking for here. A lot of people are just really wondering, can they go out and actually get good enough players to make a sacrifice like that, worthwhile?
Max, I didn't get to read the entirety of the article, got mostly through it, but was there any
Wow,
coach?
Thanks, Craig.
No,
okay.
I'm going to finish it eventually, but no, the parts that I did see, it was basically guys going like, I don't understand how they're going to get, how it's going to work, but was there anybody that I missed in not finishing it that was like, oh, I totally see it, and I think that they can make out on the other end pretty okay?
Yeah, no, I think that there's, and I'm just giving you grief, bud. I'm joking, but I think there's people who look at it, who've been doing this for a long time, and certainly folks who like have gone through tough rebuilds in the past, who think like, man, it's so much easier now. Like, look at, it used to take years to do this stuff and to recruit several recruiting classes, and you couldn't just cut guys the way Deion Sanders has. I think people look at it and say like, it kind of makes sense to rip it down to the studs, and in some ways, maybe this does expedite the rebuilding process and save some time to do all of this right now. But I think there's also people who are watching this with a lot of curiosity, wondering like, what if this works? Like, what are the implications of that if this does work? If cutting 50 guys, turns Colorado into a much more successful team in year one, then it's a little scary to think maybe other people will try to replicate this, knowing that it's got some success behind it.
The magazines that used to come out, a lot of things have moved online, but there used to be those preseason magazines that would come out in June. Is that even possible anymore?
Do you guys remember there was one year that they were all totally ruined because the stuff with Coach Burrell all happened in May, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like they were just like none of it was in there. Yeah, like I think the deadlines on that stuff is pretty early. So yeah, I still certainly go out and buy my Phil Steele, and he does the best he can with like what he knows at the time when he sends it to the printers. But man, just you talk with coaches about just how fluid the roster stuff is now, and how many guys they're still trying to recruit in May, as they try to fill out their 85, and you kind of at least you have a little bit better sense now with this deadline of like you shouldn't have that much attrition after this. But it's hard to pick a date in May or early June or whatever when all this stuff is finished.
Yeah, for people who are like think what Deion did is bad or egregious or whatever. I mean, from his perspective, this was one of the worst teams in college football, not just last year, but for a stretch. And comparatively, if you took last year's team and compared them to some other really bad teams in the Power Five, they were not winning any battles in that either. So you kind of get like, well, what am I doing if I have this first year exemption, this ability to do all this and not using it?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair counterpoint, and I think that there's a couple players. They have an offensive lineman who's a veteran starter who went in the portal and committed to UCLA. There's a couple wide receivers who left there who I think have a lot of Power 5 options. But, it'll be interesting to see where the rest kind of end up. I think by and large, you're going to see guys go to G5 or FCS or something like that. And so, maybe Deion will, based on how that goes, and look, that's tough for those kids at this time of year to find scholarships at Power 5 schools. But, I mean, maybe when the dust settles here, you'll point to that group and say they didn't lose a lot in terms of guys that ended up at good places. And so, I get that piece of it. The real thing that's interesting here over these next few weeks, they've been able to pick up some good players from Florida State, and they're recruiting, guys that come from Alabama and Georgia, some of these bigger programs and stuff. But can you ultimately end up winning on some of these best players in the portal, like Alton McCaskill or Zachary Franklin, some of these guys? Can you win those battles, or do you end up kind of taking guys that, similar to when you were at Jackson State, or even maybe guys that played for you at Jackson State, that it's hard to tell, is this guy really like a Pac-12 caliber player?
Max, did we last time we talked to you talked about Tyler Buckner? I can't recall.
I can't recall either.
But just your thoughts on him and the move to Alabama. And I guess the biggest story with this is really not even so much Tyler Buckner as, for a lot of people, what it signifies about Alabama, right? And their quarterback spot and not having the guys ready to jump in and all those types of things. So just what do you make of Saban having to go post-spring to grab a quarterback and what Tyler Buckner might mean for them moving forward?
Yeah, it's interesting to have that combined with you've got Auburn looking to take either Casey Thompson or Peyton Thorne, I think. Like both of those powerhouses that can recruit at a high level, feeling like they don't really have the guy coming out of spring is pretty interesting. I think with Tyler Buckner, I'm still like a little bit surprised by the whole thing. You would think that like Tyler Buckner, I heard some of the other schools that were involved there, and like you would think he probably could have found a school that would like absolutely guarantee him the starting job. So you would think if he chose Alabama, he must have been, and didn't take any other visits, like he must have been given pretty good assurances that he's going to be the guy there. Because I think after being injured last year and not playing that much, like that kid needs to play. That's why he went in the portal. So he must like his chances. And you're right. I think it's hard not to kind of take that as not an indictment, but just like an assessment that, Tommy Rees, the new OC, maybe he's not liking the consistency and the play that he's seeing from Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson. Obviously, none of those guys went in the portal, so like they're sticking around to compete, it seems. And I think there's still ways to go on this stuff. But yeah, you're right. I mean, obviously there's a familiarity between Rees and Buckner, but it does feel like Alabama came out of the spring feeling like we're not quite good enough. And look, nobody's going to be Bryce Young, but interesting that with the four options they have, all blue chip guys, they felt like they needed one more.
Max, I know you got to go. We have maybe another question or two for you. Mine is that when we get to this expanded college football playoff, do you think it almost needs to be where every conference plays the same number of conference games and it's not an uneven number?
I've not thought about that before, but I think that's true. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think that that they probably all should be, whether it's 8 or 9. I would assume 9 being the better way to go. I think that's probably true in terms of fairness and in terms of like, there's a lot more for the committee to consider now. Usually it's just been, okay, kind of who won the conference championships and then who were the next few best teams. I think when you've got to compare resumes of way more schools now and have way more schools that like you're really seriously looking at throughout November. Yeah, that's probably true. You need some equality there in terms of the non-conference schedules and how many conference teams you play. I think it's a good point.
Max, thank you. Appreciate your time. As always, Max Olson. Have a great week, the rest of the week and weekend. Max Olson with theathletic.com. Coming up next.